pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time we have public comments. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on an item which is not on our agenda? Please come.
Yes, hi. We're building a house in Newark, and we had asked ACWD for estimate, and they did give us an estimate, but when we spoke to them, the estimate that they gave us, we came down with a contractor. The estimate they gave us was, I mean, it was workable. We thought it was good. Because our intention was that we would like to do it, or our contractor would like to do the work himself. But then now we received the estimate, and it's way higher than what we initially talked about. So my father went over and spoke to the gentleman over here, and he said that this is what it is, and the reason we don't deal with other contractors or third parties is because most of the time they go, they don't do the work, or at the end of the day they want to clean the shit all over. If somebody left over there, then they have to do it. I say, we will provide you the insurance. You want the deposit, we will give you the deposit. They told me to whatever you want to do, because we cannot allow you. You know, outrageous, $33,000 for one connection with a PVC pipe. They crossed the street to bring it, and $26,300 for charge for that. I worked for Rescue Route for a long time ago, and the most will cost $200 a PVC pipe. The construction cost will be total not across the $10,000. I didn't collect it with 30 years that money to just pay to the water district. And that's outrageous. So, per our contractor, I guess he has worked in other cities or so, and they've allowed him to do the work. The same contractor they do is Santa Clara. And we would like to see if we can do that, or he can do that over here also for us. So we can do some, so we can save some.
Well, ask the staff if they have any.
Could I advise if we could make sure their contact information is given to us, and then we can have our manager of engineering and technical services get back to them.
So, sir, we'll take your information and see what we can do. See what flexibility there may be.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Is there a number we can give him to call directly?
Yeah, Mr. President. Good evening. And guys, yes, I'm the manager of the department. So what I'd want to do is get your contact information, or you can just, if you can record my number just right here. It's 510-668-4401. And I'd just like to talk to you a little bit further about your project and get some more detail.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my name is Ed Stevenson. Stevenson, like the boulevard.
Stevenson Boulevard.
Yeah.
We live over there.
I don't live on Stevenson Boulevard, but that would be interesting. It'd be hard for me to lose my way home.
Yeah, little by little, I don't know they want.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Exactly the same. First name.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? Yes, please.
Good evening, board. My name is Greg Lemos. I live in Newark. I'm going to start from the back end because I was noticing that on your calendar on 5.9 you're going to talk about compensations and all that. But anyway, I just want to say that I think it was brought up by Mr. Sethy that you wanted $300 or considered $300
Sir, if it's on the agenda,
per meeting.
this is the time to speak on items which are not on the agenda.
Well, okay. Something was brought up about other agencies. East Bay Mud, for one, has a budget of $1.8 billion. It has 2,000 skilled staff. It services 1.3 million people, and it covers an area of 331 square miles. They have 4,200 miles of pipe. They also operate a wastewater that serves 656,000 people in an 88 square mile area. They have 7 board members, and it's so large, the area is so large, they consider it in wards.
But we will have the board compensation issue come up and open that up for public comment at that time.
Okay, but you only give me 3 minutes, so I'm just
we'll give you
I'm just
more.
trying to get my words in before you give me my 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board on an item which is not on our agenda? So that, in case, I'll close the public comment section and move to the consent calendar. Is there items that someone would like to amend the consent calendar with?
I will make the motion to add item 5.1 through item 5.8 to the consent calendar, please.
I will second.
Okay. Director Sethy?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Gunther?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
And Weed?
Aye.
I will
Do we
make
have
the
a motion for the consent calendar as amended.
Yes, I'll make the motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended, please.
I'll second. Roll call, please.
Director Sethy?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Gunther?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
And Weed?
Aye. Item 5.9 is a public hearing regarding amending policies for compensation expenses and reimbursements for board members. This is your chance, sir. I've got a, we have one speaker. Please speak.
I think there's going to
thought
be,
you said
I
it
think
was
there will
all right.
be,
Do I- is it-
President Weed, there's a formal public hearing that's required for this item, so maybe you should allow your staff to kind of introduce the item, and then when we open the public hearing, Mr. Lemos can speak at that time. That'd be great. Thank you.
Please, I was given a script, but if we can, I can read the script if you will. These are, I'll give you even the subtitle. It's an instruction for President Weed's script. A, on behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public and your participation in this evening's public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive and hear comments related to board member compensation, including 1, the number of days that a board member may be compensated. 2, the amount of compensation for attendance at meetings and other service rendered at the request of the board. And 3, the list of activities that are considered service rendered at the request of the board. Thank you for attending. Now I'd like to review the ground rules for the public hearing. I will open the public hearing. ACWD staff will make a brief presentation. Upon conclusion of the presentation, the board and ACW staff will receive public comments. The board and staff will receive all comments without responding. Upon conclusion of the public comments and or protest, the board will respond to the questions, comments from the public, request input from the staff, and deliberate on the issues, and then close the public hearing. Second, public comment. Each person here is 5 minutes. I don't see a big crowd, so I have some latitude on that. To comment, and we will require strict compliance with the time limit so that everyone is treated the same way. The 3 is the speaker cards if needed. There are speaker cards in the back of the room. Please submit a speaker card to the district secretary. Completing a speaker card is voluntary, so you need not do it, but it's recommended. Next, the public hearing is now open. Mr. Ann?
Yes, I'd like to just put a framework about the discussion this evening. And as you recall, at the last board meeting on July 13th, the board discussed its policy for compensation for board members and policy for expense reimbursement for board members. More specifically, the board discussed amending its policies to possibly do the following: increase the number of days that a board member may be compensated; 2, increase the amount of compensation; 3, modify the list of activities that are considered service rendered at the request of the board. The board set a public hearing for today to consider these potential amendments to the policies and authorize staff to provide the required notice of the public hearing. The district published a notice of the public hearing in the Tri-City Voice, the Argus, and posted a notice of the public hearing on the district's website. And then we've also put together a brief PowerPoint presentation to provide a whole framework for our discussion this evening. The first one is involving the water code sections that apply to this area, and the water code does specify the amount of compensation and the number of days, but the water code also recognizes that the county water districts can increase both compensation per day and the number of days per month. And it's subject to some restrictions. That is that the compensation increase may be 5% for each calendar year, and it can't be compounded following operative date of the last adjustment, which was 2002. So currently it's set at $175. If you use that 5%, it brings us to a maximum of $306.25. The other restriction is that the number of days may be up to 10 days in a calendar month. The board must adopt any such increases by ordinance, and the board must have this public hearing and prior notices in a newspaper of general circulation, and the ordinance will become effective 60 days from the date of its adoption. A couple other code sections also apply, and that both the compensation and expense reimbursement must be established and adopted written policy. So for the district, we do have both of these coded into 2 separate policies. Both of these were adopted at the end of 2015. Again, it's set the director compensation at $175 per day, a maximum of 8 days per calendar month, and if a director were to use up the full 8 days, it would be a maximum total of $1,400 per month. In addition, there's a pre-approved list of meetings and activities considered service rendered as a director that both of the policies address. Just going back in history in terms of what actions the board has taken, each of these 3 areas that you're discussing tonight have actually been changed in 3 different board actions. The first being in 2002, where the actual compensation was increased from $100 per day to $175 per day. Then in 2011, the maximum number of days was increased from 6 to 8 days. And then lastly, at the end of 2015, the pre-approved list was both broadened and narrowed. In terms of agency comparison, and Andy, did we distribute the list? So this is a list you've all seen before. We'll pass out hard copies of this. This is comparing all the local agencies in the area in terms of the compensation per meeting, the number of meetings per month, which is either at the maximum or lower. And then on the last column, you'll see the monthly maximum total. And you can see it ranges anywhere there from $1,000 to $2,730. So ACWD with the $1,400 maximum, that would be somewhere in the midpoint there. Thank you. And then in terms of activities that are currently considered service rendered at the request of the board, up on the screen is the whole list that has been put into policy. In addition, we gave to the board a summary of recent meetings that were attended by the board members and were subsequently ratified by the board. And in addition to that, we've also added a list of additional meeting suggestions that individual directors have brought to our attention to date. So that also should be being passed out. Once again, the framework for possible board action tonight is in these three areas. The number of days that a board member may be compensated. Again, currently that's at 8 days per month. That can increase as high as 10 days. 2, the amount of compensation for attendance at meetings and other services rendered at the request of the board. Currently, again, that's $175, and that could be increased as high as $306.25. And finally, the third item, the list of activities that are considered service rendered at the request of the board. So the board may choose to revise its policies or broaden or narrow the pre-approved list. In terms of process, once again, we continue on with conducting the public hearing to receive and hear comments on the proposed revisions to the policies. Then 2, deliberate on each of the 3 possible board actions. And finally, if appropriate, consider the adoption of an ordinance amending the policy for compensation for board members and a resolution amending the policy for expense reimbursement of board members. Also like to bring to the board's attention that for the public hearing, the district did receive 1 comment letter, and that was from Ken Nishimura, a resident of Fremont, who said he could not be here at the public hearing tonight. And that letter shall also be being distributed to you by Andy right now. Thank you, Andy. And in general, the letter objects to any board, objects to the board taking any action to increase board member compensation. So with that, I'll turn that back over to you, President Wee.
Thank you. We now have an opportunity for comments from the public. I have some comments related to the letter, which I'll make after the presentations from the public. I believe we have only 1 speaker, so I don't see the need at this time identified that we don't need a need for a speaker card. So if you please come forward and speak to the board.
Again, good evening. My name is Gregory Lemos, and I live in Newark. After the last meeting, general meeting you had, it was brought up about the compensation. I tried to go online to find out some of the things that you brought up tonight, but I got a little bit frustrated in trying to find some of the things. But like I said, I come across the East Bay and how big they are, and yet they charge less per gallon of water, if you will, and their compensation is probably a lot more than what you guys are getting. Also, they, besides the things that I read you before, their customer assistance program also deals with the homeless shelter. They give up to almost half of the bill, water bill, to anybody that qualifies for it. But that East Bay Mud is so big that I don't know how you can compare it with ACWD. I had written, well, I was going to start with this little letter that I wrote, and so I'm going to do it anyway. I think the board is doing a great job and may be deserving of a raise, but it's your knowledge that we have to pay for, but most of it, your knowledge, like Mr. Akbari is new and he's learning, and we're paying for this. And naturally, we have to pay for his being here and his education and what have you. But you've also learned from different conferences and that we also paid for. Like I said, you are deserving of a raise, but I just wondered if it's $300 is a little too much. Even the East Bay Mud, even on this, my information is a little bit different than this, but even at $1,200 for East Bay Mud, and you're trying to get up to that, I don't think that it should be that high. As far as the 10 meetings, I think Santa Clara has had that for some time. I have all that information that you had given us online, and but the wording, I don't know how to work the computer, so all my lettering is small and I can hardly even read it. Not only is my vision going bad, but my hearing. I'm 81 years old, and I just thought I'd throw that age thing in there. And I've also celebrated my 50th wedding anniversary not too long ago, and I don't know how long I can stay in Newark, not only because of the water company, but because of Newark is also raising their rates, or their bill, I should say. And by trying to get the water bill under the tax rate, I don't know if the wife and I can actually stay in California, really. Anyway, those are my thoughts for tonight. I just thank you for your listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
No other speaker on this item, then we can close the public comment session and bring it to the board.
Okay, I guess I will start. I don't think it's any surprise that I think we're being compensated fairly and well. You just look at the statistics and the list of numbers that's given to us tonight and at the last board meeting. $175 per meeting is more than fair. That's what everybody else they're getting. East Bay Mud, their pay structure is different. I still say their per meeting rate is similar to ours, but keep in mind they also do wastewater treatment. Santa Clara Valley Water District, they do flood control. We're not comparing apples to apples. If you look at a pure water agency or wastewater agency, we are on par. We're being paid fairly. Plus, this is a bit philosophical. Just remember, I personally see this position as public service. We're giving back to our community. We're not here to build a career. We're not here in this position to make sure that we could put food on the table to feed our family. Okay, this is public service. In terms of number of meetings, if you look at the handout that was just given to us, if you look at the average number of meetings, we are around 8, and the base number of meetings, the required number of meetings for each director per month is 3. We have a board meeting and 2 committee meetings. That's it. Everything else is quote-unquote elective. There are very few additional meetings that are required that the board as a whole feel a director should be present at those meetings. In terms of the list of activities, I like the activities as is without modification, because we have an opener that will allow additional meetings to be compensated as long as there's a justification and we could account to our customers why they're important. I looked at the list of meetings, so let me bring out the list. Right. So if you look at Water Now Alliance, it is a social networking. I tend to put my meetings in buckets. Need to have for the benefit of the water district. Nice to have for the district. And then the last bucket is nice to have for the directors for personal development. Water Now Alliance for me is not a must-have or need to have. Granted, even once in a while, if you look at the agenda, there are issues that's pertinent to the water district. Those are the type of meeting I think we could bring to the board, and the board could do a special authorization as allowable under our current policy. If you look at another suggested meeting is the water education for Latino leaders. We have a lot of Latino members in our community. I definitely support any outreach to the Latino community. But the purpose of the water education for Latino leaders is to convene a statewide educational conference for California's state and local Latino elected officials. Okay. If the purpose of the conference is to reach out to our Latino customers, I have no problem supporting conferences like this. But if it's just for Latino legislators to outreach to each other, it's once again not a must-have. I might even put it in the bucket of nice for personal development, but not for the district. So each one of these additional suggested meetings in this list that was just handed out to us, I think once in a while, each one of these meetings will have agenda items that's pertinent to the district, and we could approve on a case-by-case basis when there's a justification to go there. By doing a case-by-case approval, we are more transparent. We could actually account to our customers why are we going to these conferences or meetings when they sound like maybe they should be staff level meetings versus policy level for directors. Why are these conferences pertinent to us? Example would be the Water Commission. Water Commission talked about a lot of statewide issues, but I think when they have issues that specifically impact ACWD, this is when we tell our customer we need to go to this meeting even though it sounds really high level because these are the impacts and these are the benefits we're trying to get. That's where the accountability and transparency comes in. So it's pretty clear I am not in support to modify the pre-approved list either. So that's it.
Director Gunther?
I haven't changed my opinion since the last meeting much either. However, I am in support of modification of the pre-approved list. There is a danger to it, though. I came up with a lot of those items in the end there. Most, if not all of those, actually all of them, for instance, if the City of Union City has an item that affects the Alameda County Water District, I think we should have a representative there. I believe I should be there. I live there. I'm a Union City resident. Okay, I would say compensation to that meeting would be acceptable. However, if I just go to the Union City Council meeting because I'm a resident of Union City and there's nothing on the agenda, then no, I shouldn't be. And that's what I mean by having Union City Council, Newark, Fremont, the City Council meetings. If there's an item on there that reflects upon what we're trying to do, if we have to speak on an item for public support, I believe it should just be blanketed in. However, to the whole case here, I don't think the meetings are the real issue. A couple months ago, several months ago now, we raised our rates to 20%. And we also raised them another 5% in the year out. We made a promise to the public that we're going to rein in cost. Now, changing the number of meetings to 10 is a drop in the bucket. No question. Doesn't affect me at all. And in some ways I feel bad about that because it doesn't. And I'm looking at my decision, and yes, it impacts others. And I like board members getting out into the public. I think we should. I wish I had more time to do it. But raising the salary level at this point, no. The public wants us to rein in the costs. We have not shown them yet that we've done that. The perception on this is wrong. The timing is bad. I've heard the timing will never be good, and I agree. The timing will never be great. But right now, the timing is bad. We just got through with a major rate increase. And you're trying to vote for a salary increase. Even increasing the number of meetings can be perceived as a salary increase. Reality, it's not necessarily a salary increase, but it can be perceived as one. And perception is very important. And that's why I don't support it. I just don't think the timing is correct. I think we have to prove ourselves out after what we just went through in February. It was painful. I still remember it. And I just don't think we're setting the right example. We are the board. We told the public. We promised them we're going to work on the cost. This is tiny. It's infant. You know, when our budget, this is a drop in the bucket. No pun intended. It probably doesn't even qualify for that. But perceptually, it qualifies like we might as well be turning a fire hose on it. This is perception. We are the ones that have to make the movement. We have to show that we mean it. And that means that tonight, we don't accept it. We say, okay, we're going to keep it the way it is. That's how I feel. It doesn't have to do with whether or not we deserve to be compensated more. Our time is valuable, yes. But back in February, we said we were going to rein in cost. We have to take that stand and say, this is where we're going to start tonight. Year or two out, things are going better, then we could relook at it. But right now, I'm sorry I can't do it.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to keep my comments pretty short because I think I went through them in detail in our last meeting. Starting from the board policy about which meetings are eligible for compensation and expense reimbursement, I'm very comfortable with the list. I don't see a need for a change there. The policy does have flexibility so that if you attend another meeting that is beneficial or you are doing board work, you can be compensated for that. So I think I'm comfortable with where that stands. In terms of the amount of compensation per meeting, I went through it last time as well. It's about $22 an hour. I think, assuming that you're taking 8 hours of your day per meeting, which honestly most of our meetings are much shorter than that, so the hourly rate is much higher. But I think even if you take it at an 8-hour rate, it's very fair, and if somebody were to take time out from work and need to have that compensation, I think the $175 meets that mark, and I'm comfortable with where that stands. Now, the number of days that a board member might be compensated for, personally, I stand with increasing that to 10, because if a board member is putting in the time, is taking time off from work or from whatever other responsibilities they have, I think it is completely fair to say that they should be compensated for that. That's my feeling on that, and I think, I'm not going to be affected by that. I haven't had a month where I've hit that number of meetings per month, but I think that if somebody is putting in time, and they should be encouraged to do so as a board member, they should be encouraged to go to as many meetings as possible and to learn as much as they can, then they should be compensated. I think that's grounds for compensation, and it's very fair. So that's where I stand.
Sethy?
So, I want to acknowledge the comments of Director Huang and Director Gunther from the last meeting and reiterate it again tonight. I did spend the month reflecting on your comments, and I also reflected on the letter from one member of the public that we received here too. So, in terms of board compensation on a per diem basis, I'm going to withdraw the request that I was putting forward, partly because I respect both of you as board members. You have more seniority than I have, but I think we need to, there are good reasons that have been brought up for delaying consideration. I would like to have the, and I've always felt it's better if the board adopts something, especially on an important issue like this, not on some 3-2 vote or something. We need to have a little bit broader consensus in the board. I believe, just briefly though, that we're asking the wrong question, or we're looking at data, because I've seen this in other public meetings where director or council member or planning commission member compensation is looked at based on where's everybody else, and then we're going to hit the median, something like that. And I believe I'm philosophically a little bit different than Director Huang, because I believe that we're asking the wrong question. The question should be, what is the value of public service? And what do we do to make it enticing enough for people in a particular market that's close to Silicon Valley, where we'd like to attract good people to participate in service to their local government. And so I'd like to put forward those arguments, you know, sometime down the road, and I hope that we can have a healthy conversation without war of words. In terms of number of days per month, as we've seen, most districts are up at authorizing 10 meetings a month. I'm in favor of that. I realized after the last meeting, by the way, that the meetings that I have attended this is actually an incorrect picture of my meeting record history, because I only put down, until very recently, I think in the last 6 months, did I list other meetings that I have attended that were non-compensable. So I always turn in my report for just what was compensable meetings. And there was 1 month where that was an exception, where it was 9, because we had that approved by the board. So generally, and this goes back to my first year on the board, I attend 7 to 10 meetings a month. That's been a regular part of my public service. And there were occasions when I was president of the board that I did actually do 10 or 12 in a month. So I'm definitely in favor of moving the number of meetings, the maximum number, up to 10. And then as far as what meetings are authorized, I'm pretty happy with the list, the current list that we have, the changes that we made in 2015. Where I differ a little bit is that I think we need to simplify our agenda and taking up time of staff for when a board member sees an opportunity to attend something, and then we retroactively, you know, have to have it put on the agenda or approved somehow by what's not an obvious way. There is the there are really two things I'd like to bring up under authorized meetings. Bosca was left off this list for anybody but the representative of the board, and that's been Director Weed for a long time. But on occasion, I like to attend a Bosca policy meeting, which is in the daytime. It's in San Mateo, so it's easier to drive at that time. I have on quite a number of occasions gone with Director Weed to an evening Bosca meeting. I find them very informative. I learn a lot, especially with a critical water supply, being delivered to our community. What's going on with Hetch Hetchy, I think, is very important to all of us. I like getting the updates on what's going on with the with all of the investments in the seismic upgrades and improvements to their system. So I would add Bosca on there so that we don't have to go through that approval process every time. I think that's a recognizable need of the board. I'm not sure if something needs to be changed here or not, but I would like to encourage board members to attend, community meetings that don't necessarily meet our strict requirements, but force us to get out into the community. So I'm thinking of presentations I've given to local real estate organizations, Rotary, Lions Club, going to the Senior Citizens Commission meetings like in Fremont and Newark, doing library presentations in all three cities on a topic related to water, just trying to better engage with the community. And so I would just like to encourage all of us, if we can reach out. We learn things at the same time that we're trying to help educate the community. So that summarizes my comments.
Oh, thank you. I'm pleased to see that there are two other members who would support the expansion to 10 days per month, which is the legal limit. What I find a bit disconcerting is how people view their role on this board and their function and role. We're here to govern an organization which has an enterprise district, $130 million a year, 230 full-time employees whose livelihood and their families. This is not a part-time job where you can really do it by coming in and attending one meeting a month or minimum of 3 meetings a month and move on, and do it in good faith. I've made the time and committed my time and much of my life to trying to do what the best I can to learn water, participate at all levels of the state, even the federal with the ACWD's Federal Affairs, and learn about water and do it. In many of these meetings, we would be sending staff people if we could afford it, but for a small fraction of the cost, we can send a board member. To suggest that there are certain categories when you learn about these. California Water Policy conferences are extraordinary. They bring in leaders from around, and you also then get to meet on a one-on-one per basis with different people. Same thing plays out in the Water Now Alliance, where our former general manager is on the staff, Walt Ludlow. Extraordinary meetings with some really top people. Water Education for Latino Leaders. When I had a meeting I attended, they said that anyone who has Latinos in their district is a Latino leader. The AB 401, Disadvantaged Communities, is a major theme there, and learned a lot. As well as the other issues on the watershed for Alameda Creek and being able to attend. So it's a long series. You can never learn enough about water to do this job well. The more time you spend at it, the more you realize how little you understand. Now, we don't want to be here trying to micromanage the staff, because that's not our role. But it is our function, and I think we've made some valuable contributions to the discussion when we had a broader knowledge of water. And when you spend a day, as I did on Friday on a trip along with Director Sethy to Marin County Watershed, with about 30 other people who came out of the water industry, and we talked about water issues and the issues that they were running into in their districts, and you pick up a great deal. To isolate yourself and suggest that somehow that is good governance, I think is misguided. We have not addressed the pay for 15 years. When, if not now, when? Times progress, as do the budgets, and as do all of our employees, and other costs and other factors. But if we have done a number of issues to try and make our projects more efficient. We've gone from 2 board meetings a month to 1. The real savings there is on staff time and prepping for a board meeting. We found that we can do bulk our business up for those issues, but that still requires that we be contacted sometimes during the course of the month in order to achieve immediate needs that can't wait 3 to 4 weeks. We have an organization which has committee meetings where nearly every item comes before the committee before it comes to a board, so there is a sense of vetting, and they get a preliminary, and then when it comes to us, it's in better shape. I think that cases where we have not done that, we've made some terrible decisions. And I can highlight a couple that at a later time. So I will certainly support the extension to 10 days. One of the statements that we did last time when we looked at the list of meetings, because it takes a lot of time to approve a specific request to attend a meeting, more than the administrative costs are more than the cost and reimbursement for the board member. We started saying that certain organizations, and I would hope we could expand that list of organizations, are worthwhile and beneficial. I think there are other ways we can reach the community. I've suggested a foundation, which I think would be a different mechanism to do a number of our programs and would be a means for which the board members could engage in the community, rather than do, quote, outreach. So I think the statements have been made, the positions are there. We could wait for there was a suggestion that we list on our website the attendance and activities of individual board members. I'm open to considering that. There was also a suggestion in the letter that we look at the congressional concept of if you do a pay raise, that you have an election in the interim before the pay raise takes effect. And I don't see that pay raises have been a major, or per diem payments have been a major issue in any of the elections or campaigns I've been involved with. And there have been a lot. So with that, let me surmise my comments and allow a second round on this item, and I think it's important enough, and then entertain a motion.
Okay. So I guess I get to make some additional comment. In no way I am suggesting that directors should isolate themselves and not learn. I think the difference is philosophical. I would like to believe that all of us decide to be on this board because we would like to give back to our community. We have significantly raised the water rates for our customers. We provided challenges for our fixed income customers. It is only right that we limit our compensable days to what I would term as must-have for the benefit of the district, not something that's nice to have. I definitely agree that you will learn things at the California Water Policy Conference. I definitely agree that in some cases attending the Water Education for Latino Leaders Conference is a good idea. but those could be approved on a case-by-case basis if they're considered a must-to-have. Another philosophical difference is that we are not a private company. We, the 5 of us, work for our customers. They are our bosses. They are telling us some things. They told us loud and clear at the last rate hearing that they want us to manage our expenses, including the board members. On top of the dollar compensation, we have medical and dental. We have our 401k equivalent. We are being paid well. The minimum we could do is to pitch in. The dollar amount, as Director Gunther said, is very minimal. It's even less than a drop in the bucket. I will agree to that. But just remember, we ask everybody else to pitch in. We ask our staff to pitch in to do more with less. We raise our customers' rate. We ask them to use less water, and we charge them more. The least we can do is to pitch in ourselves by minimizing the costs and make sure that our conferences and travel attendances is limited to what must to have, unless there are approval that there are justification for it. I also disagree with the assessment that it incurs a lot of administrative costs for these case-by-case approvals. It is a right alone on the agenda. Some of the pre-approval involves an email from the board president, which when I was in that role, I had the pleasure to approve some of the meetings. Overall, yes, I will agree, it's symbolic, because the dollar amount we're talking about is not that great. But I think the point I try to make is our bosses, our collective bosses called the customers, are telling us that we have to manage our costs. We have to trim down. It's time we pitch in, and I feel quite strongly about that. And as far as other beneficial conferences, I think it helps us in our personal development, and I would actually, I know, I would not say I assume, I say I know, every one of the directors on this board have spent their own time to learn new things without compensation for the benefit of this water district. And that's what's so great about the 5 of us. We each have our talents. We're willing to pitch in our time. What I am asking the rest of the director to do is keep on volunteering, pitching your time, even though you are not being compensated. Keep on learning for the benefit of the district.
Thank you. Director Gunther.
Philosophically, I don't disagree with 10 days. I think we should be out in the community more. And I believe it's actually okay to be compensated for our time when we're out in the community. However, now is not the time to do this. I go back to February. The amount of money, if we go to 10 meetings, is insignificant. What is significant is the fact that it's an increase. We have told the public that we're going to hold the line. It's perceptual. It's a big difference. Yes, the cost is insignificant. But it's all about making the statement that we, as a board, understand that it's our job to try to rein in the cost. Now, we could say, yeah, it's insignificant, but I can't do that. If we could maintain, and next year the 5% looks good, or because I don't think it's going to go lower. We had budgetary thoughts of 5% out. Maybe then the time will be right. The time is not right. It's pure perception because the dollar figure, insignificant. The symbolicism, the symbolism, what we do, that's huge. So I'll be voting no.
Barry, do you have any additional comments?
I'll defer for this time.
Right.
I'll come back.
Mr. Sethy?
I'd like to ask a procedural question of our general counsel. How do you anticipate us voting on the 3 different items that we are considering under this item?
Okay, so you have 2 different policies, one that deals with compensation and one that deals with expense reimbursement. The public hearing that you had tonight only deals with the compensation component. I would envision that you would, if you're going to amend the ordinance, which is your compensation policy, it should encompass all 3 of the components that you're talking about, so it's all done at once. You would adopt one ordinance. Now, you may need to break it down to get there, but that's what I would envision. If you do not change, so the expense reimbursement policy does not deal with number 1 or 2. It comes into play for number 3. So if the board is going to, let me do it in this way, if the board is not going to change the list of pre-approved activities, there would be no need to take any action on the expense reimbursement policy. If the board were to want to modify the list of pre-approved activities, you would need to amend both the policy for expense reimbursement by the resolution as well as the policy for compensation by the ordinance. Does that answer your question, or do you need me to keep going?
Partly.
Okay.
Do we need to take these 3 different items that are under discussion about per diem, the number of days, and then the number or type of meetings covered? Is that an informal vote or poll among the board before we take a formal vote on the whole ordinance?
That's a great question. I would recommend that you would do that, is because the adoption of the ordinance, if you're going to amend the compensation policy, you should cover all of them at once, because you wouldn't want to adopt 3 different ordinances to accomplish that goal.
Okay.
It's complicated, I know, based on what I'm hearing as well.
I think the question from the board council is, do we need 3 separate motions, one for the pay, one for the number of days, and one for the pre-approved activity, or one motion that covers all 3?
I would do one motion that covers all 3, because the ordinance covers all 3. Recognizing that may put some of you in an awkward position because you may support one of those but not the other, and that's where the informal polling could happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you for answering that question. I just want to reiterate, I didn't state my case clearly here. I was in favor of modifying the approved list to include BOSCA, but also to include each of the meetings that were distributed to us where we've had to get pre-approval in the past. I'm not going to make an individual argument on each one. I have my reasons, but I believe all of them, 1 through 6, should be covered. And then the other miscellaneous meetings, I would add to that as well. Where we have Rotary, I would put down any civic organization in the community, so that it includes Lions Club and other civic organizations where I've given presentations in the past.
But only when you give a presentation.
Right. Directly water related. Okay. So, could I make a suggestion to the board president?
Please.
Why don't we take the per diem first and just take a poll? I think I know where we are. And
We can go down all 3 if you wish.
yeah.
but why don't we start with the number of days, because I think that's where we had some agreement. On increasing the number of days to 10, informally, do we have a no, we have no.
So I will not support increasing the number of days.
Dr. Gunther?
I will not support increasing the number of days. 2 noes.
I will support.
You will support.
I will.
Well, and I will. All right. Next then would be the compensation, per diem compensation.
I will not support any changes or modifications to the current per diem. Well, actually, I will not, let me rephrase that. I will not support any increase to current per diem.
I won't support the increase to the per diem.
No.
Nope.
No.
Aye, but that's a 4-to-1. And finally, the list of activities. And this is, I would open this up to a more broader question. Want any change, or if there were a way to simplify and identify additional organizations or types of activities in a more general way that would give some guidance to the board for what is compensated or not compensated.
I will not support any changes to the current policy because I think there's enough flexibility to accommodate these additional needs.
I can support the change. But because of my position on the number of meetings, I can't. Which I know is confusing, but
no, it's very rare for someone to attend the number of meetings we're now authorizing in the course of a month. But this would be to try and give better guidance to the
I
board
understand.
on what
And I'm on the fence. I'm trying to figure out, because I do feel we should be out in the community more. I do personally feel compensation, and if we're continuing, actually, if we come to the board once, perhaps maybe we should add that to the list for future times. I think there's ways we could work with that. I just have difficulty tonight with the whole process.
All right. Commissioner Huang?
I will not support.
You don't want to modify any of the meetings?
No.
Well, I do, so.
Okay. Well, this is one where I think we do need some additional work, and I think it would be worth our while to draft a document that gives clear definition to what is our intent and what is reimbursable or not. We can't cover everything with a prescriptive list. There are things that come up, special legislation, programs, other entities, in special meetings called for between various water districts, or maybe a tour of a neighboring water agency, and we don't have clear descriptions on what those guidelines should be. I think that would benefit for some additional discussion.
If I can make an additional comment here. You know, I've been actually giving a lot of thought to how we manage our meetings, our agenda, how we can shorten down on the time that it takes to get through things. And I'm looking for an opportunity sometime down the road here where we can talk about these things. I've been a student of local government, you know, since I was a young person, and I've learned so much along the way in terms of how to speed things up, how to make things more efficient. I've also practiced it in the corporate world, and I feel like there's so many encumbrances on us where we could be more efficient and take time out of the process here, both for the benefit of staff, the board, as well as the public. And so I think we need to really have a good discussion. And, you know, to a certain extent, you need to leave it up to a board member's discretion to decide whether that person feels it's valuable to attend something or not. And I will tell you that many of these items that are not on the pre-approved list are the areas where I have learned some of the most valuable things about the water industry that I'm able to bring back to my perspective on how we're governing a very large enterprise here. My discussions, and I'll get into this more later on under director's comments, but what a tremendous day of learning on Friday. It was incredible, you know, to go to another water district and and not only interface with that district, but other districts from Region 1. So I would encourage us as a board, we may not want to do anything tonight, but we need to think there's multiple ways we can improve the efficiency of our own governance process.
Thank you. I would note that in our current policy, we have significant flexibility for the president and vice president of the board. I would hope that that would be extended to all of the board members for meetings that would be of benefit to the district. Also note on tonight's agenda, we have an authorization for attendance at a Water Now Alliance-sponsored meeting at Stanford University on data in the water. Now, we're talking about investing over $20 million in automated meter reading, which is data, it's a data project. To require that that be a special, put it on the agenda, costs us far more than the $175 or $350 in per diem, because you had to analyze it, went to staff, the staff took time to discuss it, putting it on an agenda and the cost. Those are the type of meetings that should be under certain organizations when they sponsor them. You know they're going to be responsible, and you know they're going to be water related. So on this last one, I would hope that we will have further discussion at over time, and in the not too distant future, bring it back and repeatedly if necessary, to try and hammer out a better guidelines on because it goes to governance and what we view as our role and function on this board. And it's not to merely attend the 3 scheduled meetings a month. That would be a disservice and the concept of public service if that was your mindset of what you felt you were limited to. So, to that end, someone attempt to make a motion on this. It's the one item where an agreement is on the number of days, or at least we have a majority concurrence on the increasing the number of days to 10.
Yeah, if I can just ask a question on the pre-approved list. It sounds like, based on the informal polling, we know how to make the motion with regard to the number of days and compensation. I heard 2 directors say they want to continue to talk about the list. I heard 2 directors that said they didn't want to talk about the list. I'm not too sure about the 5th director. But I just wanted to remind you of the procedural rules so you can factor this into to your thinking. And it's really a question of timing. When do you want to talk about the pre-approved list? Because we did go through a formal process. We did set it and call a public hearing. We held that public hearing tonight. And we have always taken the conservative approach whenever we're going to modify the ordinance on compensation, that if we're going to modify any of those 3, we go through the procedural process of calling a public hearing. And so, for example, if you want to talk about the pre-approved list next year sometime, proceed with the ordinance, and then when it's time to talk about it again, we'll go through the process again. If you want to talk about it next month and work on it over the month, then we might want to defer action on the ordinance because we don't want to incur the expense and energy of going through the public process again, the procedural process again. So I just throw that out there for the board to continue to talk about.
Patrick, you're making my point, the case for my point very well, that this costs us money. And if we can modify our approved list of types of meetings that we're able to attend, we will be saving money. This is exactly the thing that we're trying to talk about doing here. We will save ourselves time, staff time, board time, cost of doing business to have another public hearing. There should be really, to me, shouldn't really be an argument here on accepting the types of meetings and conferences that are 1 through 6, including the other miscellaneous as well on here, as long as it's water related. I think we could modify this tonight, get it out of the way, and we won't have to address it for some time to come.
About 6 years ago, we had a workshop, 5-6 years ago, we had a workshop at the desalination plant where we went over the list of all of our, and we decided that rather than having every aqua conference activity listed separately, we'd say if it's an aqua-sponsored event, it was all right, because there were some aqua things that were being created as we went along. That was common sense. Hopefully that we can follow that same pattern and find organizations that we feel that if it's sponsored by the organization, that it would be appropriate for members to attend. And if you wish to have, someone raise an objection, I don't think that that really is related, we can bring it up on as an exception. But it just, there's hopefully a general understanding that we're trying to do business. We want an educated and engaged board, and that's achieved by encouraging participation in organizations and activities which would lead to water supply for our district. And that includes administrative issues. How do you run a business for $130 million with all of the personnel, insurance, etc., that's involved in operating this type of an enterprise? We are a business. We're not a social charity.
Director Gunther, I'd like to appeal to you here. You said you were kind of ambivalent.
Well, there's another problem, though.
Well, let me just say that all we're trying to do here is modify the type of meetings that are on the pre-approved list.
I understand that.
We're already going to make one change to the ordinance. Why don't we get all of it done at the same time right now, wrap it up, and we don't have to come back a year from now.
Well, because if we're going to vote on one specific item once, then my answer is no. If you will do two, I have to think about it. We can't do one, because my answer to the 10 is no.
Director Gunther, if I were to establish a special board committee, possibly yourself and Director Sethy, to review the list of organizations and how that is established and how the wording of that, or would that be a methodology rather than taking a long board time off the expense of everyone here?
An ad hoc committee.
That's fine, but my understanding of how you wanted to proceed was we would vote on this one time.
And we have essentially a 3-2 vote here right now.
But it's 3-2 on one way, and 3-2 on 3-2 on item 2, and it would be 3-2 on item 3.
No, we're going to vote once here. Okay. So we have at least 3 votes to make one change to the ordinance.
Right. I think what Director Gunther is saying, that since he's philosophically opposed to increase the number of meetings, if in that same motion you add in modification of the meeting type, a list of approved meeting, he has no choice but to vote no.
If I can jump in.
Let me
Yes,
bring this back to the
Counsel?
attorney.
I think, based on the discussion, we may need to proceed with two separate ordinances.
Well, let me just say, I do not see your vote on the adoption of change to the ordinance tonight as being inconsistent, these two different positions. If we, because we're only going to vote once.
I understand.
We have an option to vote twice. So if we have a motion on the board, on the table to extend it to 10 days, we can bring back the separate issue with or without it having a public hearing.
No,
So,
Formal process.
you have to.
so, I need to think about this, but I think where we're going is
Complicated.
we're going to need two different ordinances. One that amends the number of days for which the compensation can be, for which the activities are compensated, because I'm hearing that there's going to be 3 votes to go to 10. And then another ordinance and resolution to change the pre-approved list, potentially, because it sounds like there might be 3 different directors who would be willing to take a fresh look at the pre-approved list.
Okay.
If I'm hearing you correctly.
Let me try to make one more appeal here to Director Akbari. Since you're already one of the 3 votes for a change in the ordinance, you could greatly assist the entire board, save us a lot of money, so that we don't have to come back in a year or have to go down the road of 2 different ordinances, where we make one modification tonight and we put this to bed. So my recommendation would be add the 6 items that are on the not on the pre-approved list, plus the other miscellaneous, add Bosca, and then we have it done.
Can I ask one more clarifying question? What are the procedural issues with doing 2 ordinances versus just 1?
So because we've gone through the public process, I think we could do 2 ordinances. I think we would need a break to give me some time to figure out how, if we wanted to do this tonight, how we would do this. As I sit here, I have a clear understanding of what I'm going to do with the number of days. I'm not so sure how to deal with the pre-approved list yet, but I think we could do 2 different ordinances, one for the one and one for the other, if that's the direction that the board wants to go. But I would recommend we call a quick break at some point so that we can kind of look through this and make sure it's going to be okay.
The appeal I'm trying to make to Director Akbari is if he supported these modifications, along with supporting the change to 10 days, we keep the ordinance whole, the way it is right now. We save money, and I'm discouraging us from breaking apart our ordinances. I think having an effective ordinance is one you can look up and you see all the items that are within there.
I think that in the end it would all be merged, but that's...
Yeah.
Well, I don't support the modification to the expense reimbursement policy and expense reimbursement and compensation policy. So that's why I think 2 ordinances would be the more appropriate way.
Can you explain why?
Well, I think already built into the policy are effective measures where if a board member does attend another meeting that they want to be compensated for, I'm satisfied with the way that the policy stands as is.
Director Akbari, I would argue that you have not spent time on the board where...
Well, I have a
what the
possible...
cost is.
Okay, let us see if we
I
can
have a
move.
possible solution,
Okay, please.
considering...
If I may just finish,
Please.
Sure.
finish my question to council. So what if we could we vote on changing the number of days to 10, but deferring for next month the changes to the policy on compensation, the pre-approved list? What would be the procedural impacts there?
So you would be adopting one ordinance tonight, and then you would be, I'm thinking out loud now, which is probably not a great
You'd
idea.
have to call another public hearing.
You'd have to call another
Would you
public
like a
So-
break?
So we're holding the public hearing now. You would adopt one ordinance, and you would reopen the public hearing for consideration of the second ordinance that would further amend the policy, and you would defer the resolution on the expense reimbursement item to the next meeting as well. I think that would work. And then ultimately, if you adopted two separate ordinances, they would both be amending the policy on compensation, so your policy would be one intact document at the end. It would just, in two ordinances, would be making two separate changes.
So if I may, as much as it irritates me and works against my interests, I would like to remind the board that it is possible to defer the motion to next board meeting. So it's a lot cleaner to take them all together again.
There's another, considering I am probably, I would assume at this point, the third vote on changing the list, if I was to decide that, no, I actually, philosophically, once again, support the changing of the list. But my previous comments were perception. And this is why I'm on the fence with changing the list as well, is perception. And so I don't mind looking at reviewing how we do it. I think it's worked. It does cause more issues. However, to move this item along, if I was to say no, then we get the 10-day thing solved, and we could address the list at a future time.
Let me suggest that we try to get done what we can do, so that if we could make a vote tonight on the 10 days, that was as an ordinance. And on the second issue, I would encourage that we have additional discussion, because the policy at best is awkward. It could be, spending some time on that policy of what's approved or not approved, what the better definitions of what the intent is, would be beneficial. And I think based on the dynamics of this discussion I've heard, if Director Gunther and Director Sethy could meet possibly on August 24th when they have their Water Resources and Conservation Committee meeting, that might be a time to have bring the two of you together to come up with some ideas, share with the General Manager how you see let's see if there's a way we can improve that document. Would they be open to that?
Yeah, I like that idea.
I may have a conflict with the 24th, but maybe we could change the timing.
It doesn't have to be immediately at the next meeting, but when the two of you have an opportunity to get together. So what I'd like to do this evening then is at least to have a motion on the ordinance to change the number of days from 8 to 10.
Before you do that, again, I just want to clarify, if you want to proceed to modify the list, I would recommend that you make a decision tonight to say you are holding open the public hearing for the ordinance to a set date. Or be comfortable, if you adopt the ordinance as is, that if you make a decision to revise the pre-approved list, my recommendation is you go through the process again, which would include coming to the board, setting another public hearing, holding another public hearing, and then adopting another ordinance. So it's unclear to me if you just adopt the ordinance and move on. My recommendation as your general counsel is when you go back to revisit the list, you go through the process again.
Okay. And last time we had a workshop where we, of the full board, where we worked through that and we made everyone contribute. That may be the other mechanism by which we could look at the list. So rather than just two members, we could have the whole board in a workshop that would try to work our way through it. It's time consuming, but in the end it saves everybody a lot of angst. So then at this point then, if we follow the current advice, we would have a motion to adopt the ordinance with a single change, which is the number of days from 8 to 10.
Is that, you're making the motion?
I'm suggesting it. I'm the chair, so it's best to have someone else make the motion.
Okay, I'll put forward that motion to make one change to the compensation ordinance to increase the compensable days from 8 to 10, with no other changes to the ordinance.
Do you have a second for that?
I'll second that motion.
Moved and seconded. If there's any further discussion, there being none, roll call, please.
If I could just clarify before the roll call, because I have the ordinance here in front of me, so we just know exactly what we're adopting. It's ordinance number 2017-01. There is one error that we need to correct for the record, and that is in item number 2. It says the amount of daily compensation that the board members receive was increased in June of 2002. It actually was in March of 2002. That was my error, so we're going to correct that in the ordinance. And then number 5, I'll just read you the new version of what is it. It basically dealt with all 3 of those before, and it will be revised to say the Board of Directors desires to amend the policy for compensation for board members to increase the number of days that a board member may be compensated from 8 days to 10 days in a calendar month, period. And I've deleted everything else that deals with the amount of compensation and the modification of the pre-approved list. So with those, just those 2 changes, the ordinance that's in the agenda packet would be fine to adopt, and I just wanted to clarify that that is the motion that is before the board before you act.
Roll call.
Okay. Director Sethy?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Gunther?
No.
Huang?
No.
And Weed?
Aye.
Now,
Okay.
if I might make a suggestion here.
Please.
Just throw it out. Very rarely do we have an ad hoc committee. I like the prospect of setting up an ad hoc committee if it's Director Gunther and myself, because that allows us to work with the General Manager and the staff singularly on that one issue. I would rather keep it out of the Water Resources Committee meeting if we can do that. So don't we have to go through a formal process to adopt the ad hoc committee, or is that at the prerogative of the President of the Board?
I would like to quickly review your rules of the board because I believe it's addressed in there and I don't remember off the top of my head, and I actually don't have my copy of the rules of the board here, so...
I seem to think it's a prerogative of the Board President.
It might be, but I would want to check the rules of the board.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to do that immediately. We
Okay.
have our motion, and I can always do that as we go through the process, and hopefully we'll have a rewrite of this in the not-too-distant future. All right. Thank you. It's amazing in the governance process that sometimes the most minor issues are they're considered to be the most important, both in time and they do relate to governance, so they are the most important. The next is item 5.10, which is a designation of district authorized agents for obtaining federal and state disaster financial assistance.
Yes, thank you, President Weed. For this item, we have the Manager of Operations and Maintenance, Steve Peterson, to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. N. In response to the January 2017 California atmospheric storm events, a presidential disaster declaration was made on February 14, 2017. The declaration enabled federal and state financial assistance to be made available through the California Office of Emergency Services administered Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. The California Office of Emergency Services, or Cal OES, requires all non-state agency financial assistance applicants to have an authorized agent. Since the district is a non-state agency, a board resolution is needed designating up to 3 titles or district positions as authorized agents for the district. The authorized agents would be authorized to engage with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and the Governor's Office of Emergency Services regarding public assistance funding programs and grants applied for by the district. A board resolution for this purpose would be effective for 3 years following the date of authorization. Currently, district staff is actively working with representatives of Cal OES and FEMA to obtain financial assistance for the repair costs of district facilities damaged by the 2017 storm events. The 3 district facility sites that incurred damage from the 2017 storm events are Mayhew Reservoir, Avalon Tank, and Vallecillas Channel. The district's request for public assistance for an estimated cost for damage repairs has been submitted and approved by FEMA. The request included a total estimate of $680,000 for the repair cost of the 3 facility sites damaged by the 2017 storm events. The district will be reimbursed at least 90% of the actual costs, up to an estimated amount of $612,000. Additionally, the repair work must be completed within 18 months of the declared disaster or approved time extension request. The recommendation is, by motion, approve a resolution designating district staff appointed the positions of Emergency Response and Security Officer, Manager of Operations and Maintenance, and Accounting Supervisor as district authorized agents for obtaining federal and state financial assistance under Public Law 93-288 as amended by the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act of 1988 and the California Disaster Assistance Act.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the board?
I have a question regarding this. It appears, and perhaps council could help on this, can we just add this to their job descriptions? I mean, it seems that we should always have somebody on staff to act as an agent with FEMA if the need arises, rather than having to go to a board determination that we do this. I mean, if we see a need for FEMA, we should just have people designated. I'm fine with the motion as written. I would support that we take it a little further and just say, hey, we're going to designate these people for our agency to deal with this, and we move on. So if something was to happen, it will happen, hopefully not in the next 3 years, but we all know we're going to get hit with an earthquake, probably have to visit with FEMA again. It'd be crazy if it was 3 years and 1 day. Is there a possibility to make this longer than 3 years, or is this government at its best?
Could I help first? Okay. These are FEMA and Cal OES requirements, and there's 2 options. You can have a blanket template. That's the way we're approaching this for any disaster for the next 3 years. Or you can check another box that says this is for a specific disaster and this disaster only.
Okay, but we can't go beyond 3 years.
No, it's, the law says, just 3 years.
So we're at government at its best. Okay. Thank you.
That's exactly right.
Other comments? One from myself. I hope, and I have no problem with passing the law as drafted and meeting the letter of the law for all disasters. However, we can have a board meeting on an emergency basis with 24 hours notice, to my knowledge. And I would hope that our internal policies and practices are that if we're going out for emergency relief, that if we call an emergency board meeting and have the action confirmed in a public venue. So the board is aware of what's going on and we can be briefed and be engaged. Members of the board have comment on that?
No, actually, I would like to make one comment on this item. Just
Please.
compliment to staff. I don't think any of us were expecting this grant or the reimbursement for the efforts that we made for the money that we have spent. So thank you for taking the initiative. Please convey our appreciation to staff.
Thank you. And I would like to just add to Director Huang, one of the reasons why we're going through this exercise, this is a relatively small amount as compared to what would happen after a huge, large seismic event. But we wanted to explore this opportunity with FEMA and Cal OAS to get practice, learn the ropes on what's required to obtain this type of public assistance. So that was an added benefit. We're learning as we go through this process, and I just wanted to point that out. That was one of the drivers for taking the initiative and going through this process.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. Sethy?
I also had a similar compliment to the staff, and I really appreciated the staff being proactive in seeking out reimbursement money here. I did have one question when I was reading through the materials. I could see where Mayhew Reservoir and Avalon Tank were structural issues or something that could affect the structure around there. And we want to prevent anything from any hazardous situation from developing. But how did Vallecito's Channel qualify as a FEMA opportunity?
FEMA's interpretation of, or description of damage is quite broad, and so we reviewed all possibilities with FEMA and representatives of FEMA. We escorted FEMA representatives to the various job sites, and they concurred with district staff that we did in fact were impacted by the storms of 2017 at the Vallecito's, along the Vallecito's Channel in the terms of embankment erosion that was increased due to the high flows that occurred during the winter storms.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you. And again, I'm glad to see we're going through the exercise. San Francisco, just this past year, completed their dealings with FEMA on Loma Prieta. Took them 25 years because of the poor documentation that they had after the incident. So we'll learn. Thank you. Do we have a motion for this item?
I will gladly make the motion.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Sethy?
Aye.
Akbari? Aye. Gunther?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
And Weed.
Aye. Okay, we'll now move on to completes our action calendar. Oh, no, we have a, we have I'm sorry, we have item 511, resolution approving debt management and disclosure policy.
Yes, and for this item, we have the Manager of Finance presenting this item, Jonathan Wunderlich.
All right, thank you. The California Debt and Advisory Investment Advisory Commission, abbreviated CDAC, is required to collect, maintain, and provide comprehensive information on all state and local debt authorizations and issuances. SB 1029, which was passed by the state legislature last year, included a requirement for debt issuers to certify that they have an adopted local debt policy on reports they submit to CDAC. SB 1029 also contains a number of requirements for these debt policies. Some of those requirements include the purposes for which an organization will issue debt, the types of debt that may be issued, policy goals related to the issuer's planning objectives, as well as internal control procedures that are in place to make sure debt proceeds are only spent on appropriate projects. Staff has developed a debt policy consistent with those requirements, and the policy has been reviewed by both General Counsel and Bond Counsel, and was also reviewed with the Finance Committee at its July 18th meeting. So the recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the proposed policy, and with that I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from members of the board?
I have a few comments for the benefit of the board here. In the last year, I attended a couple of Aqua seminars that were dealing with both federal and state requirements in terms of having a government entity have a formally adopted debt policy. So I asked if we could actually have this reviewed at the Finance Committee meeting, and lo and behold, our staff was already working on it. And they were one step ahead of us here. So just to put this in perspective, we have an investment policy, which is adopted by the board, periodically reviewed. We have a cash management policy, and I think you remember Shelley Burgett really went into some detail in terms of how we manage that. So that's a second important policy. But a debt management policy is something that we have never had. And there are new GASB requirements, SEC requirements, state law that have now been passed that require that we have a formal debt policy. Having gone through 2 classes on this, my first reaction when I saw what Herman Chen had put together principally was, wow, this was really, really good work. And the level of detail, I think, here really surprised me, that we were looking at every aspect of a debt management policy. And being familiar with these kind of documents from the corporate world, I really wanted to pay the biggest compliment to Herman Chen. He really did a fine piece of work here, and you can tell that it required a lot of research, a lot of thinking, a lot of organization, and I think this is an absolutely wonderful document to help guide the board and our own staff. I'm happy to see this.
Thank you. Department. So do we have a motion for approval of the resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve item 5.11, adoption of the debt management policy and disclosure policy.
Second. Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Sure. Director Sethy?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Gunther?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
And Weed.
Aye. Next are reports, board committee reports. Is there anyone who wishes to make a comment on item 6.1.1 through 6.1.5? Being none, let's move on to operational reports.
As is usual practice, this is just by exception, so if there's any questions from the directors, staff will be happy to respond.
I have a couple.
Please.
So, I wanted to bring to the attention of the board, the public, that I have been watching our monthly hardness reports quite closely. They've been going, our numbers in Union City, Niles have been skyrocketing. I was at 3 community events this last month, at the Halal Festival, at the Sikh Gurdwara, and then at a Niles meeting that Director Weed was at as well. And the number of questions about the hardness of the water keeps popping up wherever I go in those parts of town. And a lot of the residents that I was speaking to have not even lived here that long. They're relatively new to our community. And so it's funny how integrated our Tri-City area is, because people were saying, my friends that live over in Newark say that the water's really soft over there. How come when I have guests over here at my house, everybody complains about how hard the water is? And so these comments are coming up all the time. So I had a conversation with Mr. Peterson, which I'm going to ask if he can share some of this information, but just to give you the background, my question was related to, well, each month over the summer we're using less and less Hetch Hetchy water as the hardness levels are going up, and we're using more groundwater, which of course is hard. So why are we not using more Hetch Hetchy water? That was the question I put to Mr. Peterson.
That was a great question, Director Sethy. And Andy, could you bring up the July average hardness map, please?
It seemed like we were going in the opposite direction of what we should have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm glad I had a chance to talk to you about this.
I am too. And it gives me an opportunity to share with the full board a little bit about some of the complexities of our operating system, as well as meeting our hardness targets. Can you expand that a little bit? Okay, so what I want you to take a look at is the various colors of the map, and you see that they're spread all over our distribution system. And on the right-hand side there's a legend, and the darker the color, the harder the water. So each week, technicians from the Water Quality Lab take water quality samples of the distribution system from each of the 53 sampling stations shown on the hardness map. The samples are tested for chlorine residual, fluoride, bacteriological testing, and hardness. The hardness of the water varies between the production facilities, primarily because of the variation in the hardness of the source water. So towards the Warm Springs area, you would have water that's influenced or output from TP2. Towards Newark, you would have the desalination facility. And in the northern part of our service area, primarily, definitely within Union City, it's from the blending facility. At the district's blending facility, operators blend hard water from the district's groundwater wells with soft water purchased from San Francisco. Operators operate the blending facility targeting a year-round target of 150 parts per million calcium carbonate, and within a range between 135 and 165 parts per million. When determining the hardness target at the blending facility, operators must consider multiple factors, including groundwater levels, the hardness of individual groundwater wells, San Francisco minimum and maximum contractual purchase amounts, and that's been particularly important the last couple of years with the drought, conservation, and the low demands. San Francisco, and also San Francisco's use of local supplies. From the Hetch Hetchy system in Yosemite, the water is quite soft, on the order of 10. And the local supplies from the local reservoirs, San Antonio and Calaveras, The hardness can be more in the range of 130. So it takes a lot more San Francisco to blend with our harder water when it's 130 than it is when the hardness is 10. As well as San Francisco water quality. San Francisco has had challenging water quality conditions for the last 2 years, with elevated THM levels, and this is a disinfection byproduct. And in July, there were concerns with high turbidity levels and color. When San Francisco is experiencing challenging water quality conditions, operations makes adjustments at plants at its makes plant rate adjustments at its production facilities and adjusts the hardness target at the blending facility. So in May and June of this year, San Francisco had unusually high THM levels. So what we did, and I think I reported this a couple of board meetings ago, demands were low, so we were able to reduce the blending facility at a very low rate and maximize production or increase production at TP2 and at the desalination facility. So that's what we did to accommodate water quality concerns from San Francisco Supplies in May and June. In July, San Francisco had a different water quality problem, and that was with high turbidity levels. Because the demands are at a summertime high, I didn't have the luxury of just turning down the blending facility. So for 2 weeks, 2 out of the 4 weeks in July, the second week and the third week in July, I allowed the hardness target to go from 150 to 165. For the entire month, and you can see it on the chart, for the month of July, the average hardness out of the blending facility was 158. So that's not too bad, but for 2 weeks, in the middle part of July, it did exceed the 150 target because we were targeting 165. And again, that was because of water quality concerns from San Francisco. We operate very conservatively from a water quality perspective in operations. It doesn't take a lot for an excursion to happen. And only 2 years ago, in 2015, we had a significant San Francisco excursion where we avoided a water quality violation, where San Francisco had a situation where raw water was introduced into their regional water system. So when the turbidities increase above what is typically expected for this time of year, then we are conservative and cut back on the use of San Francisco water. And so that's why the hardness levels were at the high range of the board-adopted policy for hardness, which is 135 to 165, for 2 weeks in July.
Thank you.
No.
Additional question?
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
That was very informative, and I quite honestly was not aware of the turbidity problems. After we had our discussion, I was trying to figure out, now, how do I convey what you told me to the people and the public in layman's terms that they can understand? It's really a very complex balancing act that we're managing. So I'll do my best when I'm out in public too.
I enjoy answering questions related to operations. So anytime I get to explain and talk about what we do and the challenges we face. I very much appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
I would like to compliment the staff, though, and it's not as sandy as it used to be. So, as a Union City resident, yes, it's hard, but the district has made some great improvements over there, and you know, we will continue to do our best. But it's kind of the way it got laid out and goes, you know, citizens utility, we go back almost that far and other issues. But no, you've made some terrific, the numbers aren't in the 200s, they're not even in the 180s today. I think I'm looking at a 172, so I'll bring out a smaller hammer.
Oh, I would say, Andy, can you pull up the second chart, please? I forgot. Yes. So 2 weeks ago, we increased our use of San Francisco to bring down the hardness levels because the turbidity levels have dropped. And you can see what the hardnesses were last week, and you can see do you see the title? Is that the right title? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So you can see the significant increase, or significant improvement in water being softer.
And I am number one. Thank you.
So since I live in Ardenwood, my water is also fairly hard, but Director Sethy, part of the reason you might get a lot of complaints from Ardenwood, so we were lucky enough for a short period of time we were getting really soft water from the desal. So the switch over is actually quite noticeable, the change in hardness, especially when you try to make a cup of tea.
Yeah. I'll share offline some of the personal comments I heard.
Thank you.
I have another item I wish
Please,
to discuss.
yes.
Item 6.2.7, the monthly demand status report. So, we actually hit 47 MGD as of July 31st, but I brought up something in our Finance Committee meeting which I thought I would bring up here. Now, I was doing this back of the hand, so Jonathan and staff can correct me. But I was trying to figure out what the financial gain prospectively is for the district. A year ago, when we were going through our finance meetings, we took the conservative approach in building our budget and financial forecast. And so Thomas Nizer and Herman were pretty much looking at us going up incrementally out of the drought up to about 34 MGD. And I was putting forward a thought in those meetings that if you went back to the drought in the 30s, the 70s, and then the 87 through 92 drought, that what we saw in each one of those cases, pardon me, what we saw in each one of those cases in our district was that there was a modest spike in recovering of water demand in the community. So I did some back of the envelope calculations here, and what I figure on is that we're going to end up the calendar year at about 38 MGD, which is higher than what we were forecasting, which was closer to 33, 34, the most 35. So what is the gain financially for the first 6 months of our fiscal year? I figured it out that it's probably between 500,000 and 1 million units of water. So it actually translates to $2 to $4 million of benefit to the district. If that were to hold in the second 6 months of our fiscal year, we could see some noticeable financial kick to our water revenues, which would be good, and a little bit more than expected. So as long as we hold our costs down, we have the little bit of extra revenue, we're going to get much closer to the goal that I've stated, which is to get water revenues to cover operating costs. We're getting close to that. So that was just some analysis there. I'm sure the staff is going to have a precise number, but that was my guesstimate. That's all on that item.
Okay. Thank you. I know we're going to have a discussion on strategic planning, but I would still note that here we're the peak summer with a fairly good recovery from the drought. We're below 50 MGD. We're maintaining anywhere from 80 to 90 MGD of capacity. So we still have significant excess capacity that we're paying to operate and maintain. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to look at that as we go forward. Thank you. Next then, if we've completed that, we'd go to our staff presentations, which is the update on the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission Alameda Creek Recapture Project.
I think we could take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, okay, we can take a break
before we go into the staff presentation. That'd be okay?
Yes, thank you.
5 minutes.
Now we can cross that off.
Are ready.
Sound cue. At this time then we will return to open session. It is 8:15 and we now have staff presentations. 6.3.1 update on the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission Alameda Creek Recapture Project.
As President Weed, this evening we have Thomas Nizer here, our Water Supply and Planning Manager, who will be giving an overview of the Alameda Creek Recapture Project and some of the issues and concerns that we as the district have. So Thomas will give an overview of the project and outline some of these concerns.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. So let's jump right in. There we go. Great. The Alameda Creek Recapture Project is a concept that the San Francisco Public Utility Commission has put out. I'll just say San Francisco. And the idea is to recapture some of the environmental water that's being released or is planned to be released from San Francisco facilities in the Alameda Creek watershed, specifically Calaveras Dam and Alameda Creek Diversion Dam. These environmental flows are a combination of releases and bypasses at different times of years, and I'll just refer to them as environmental flows. The project's located in Sunol Valley, and notably it's upstream of Niles Canyon and ACWD's recharge facilities. Just to walk you through a little bit of what this looks like, as the board's aware, San Francisco has been rebuilding Calaveras Dam as well as modifying Alameda Creek Diversion Dam, and once those facilities are completed and once the Bart Weir is laddered, San Francisco will begin making those environmental flows. It will come from heaven. It will come from the facilities in the watershed, flow through Sunol Valley, through Niles Canyon, past ACWD's recharge facilities, and out into the San Francisco Bay. The purpose for these flows are several-fold. There's a combination of providing habitat and rearing flows for steelhead in the watershed, so summertime cool water flows, but they're also to provide migratory flows for in-migrant adults as well as out-migrant smolts, and also adults migrate back out. Unlike salmon, steelhead will come in, spawn, and head back out to the bay. The concept is to take advantage of an existing quarry pit in Sunol Valley. There we are. And to float on a barge in the middle of that pit a couple of, just a moment here. Some minor technical errors at the moment. To float a couple of variable speed pumps on these barges in the middle of this existing quarry pit in the Sunol Valley, and to pump that water back up into San Antonio Reservoir, or to take it to San Francisco's Sunol Valley Water Treatment Plant. The premise is that water being released from these reservoirs will be naturally percolating into the ground. It'll make its way into those pits, and when they pump that out, they are recapturing that water. So the water has to go from the stream into the groundwater basin and then into the quarry pits. Maybe I could try the mouse. Unfortunately, there's quite a few animations to explain. It's a pretty complex topic. The animations help quite a bit. So here we are highlighting the location of where the main pit is and the pump to take that water up to San Antonio, or if it's running, to run to the water treatment plant. In addition to trying to recapture the water, San Francisco has a proposal to do an accounting method for their recapture, and that they would in some years actually pump more water out of that pit than they're releasing in the same year. So ACWD has had some concerns about this concept since the get-go. Fundamentally, we actually agree with the concept to have some ability to recapture surplus environmental water that has, that has provided an environmental benefit and is in surplus of what's needed to provide additional benefit. To capture that and reintroduce that into the water supply is a concept that's done throughout the state of California. It's a good concept in general, but we have had some concerns about this, and we've raised them from the beginning, most notably that this is a really complex concept when you're talking about the interaction of surface water and groundwater. And it requires a very sophisticated analysis to say how much water is being recaptured in real time, how does that accounting system work, and most notably, what is the impact downstream? And we've told San Francisco from day one, both our fisheries operations as well as our own operations work on a daily time step, and we need to know at a daily level what that project's going to look like for ACWD as well as for the species of concern, which is the steelhead. Another issue we've had is that the project doesn't capture a like amount of water in real time. So if you think about this, San Francisco will be at certain times releasing or letting bypass on the order of hundreds of CFS, but that groundwater seepage factor is only 10 to 20 CFS. So there's some, it's not as simple as saying we're releasing one unit, we're recapturing one unit, and have nice, simple, clean accounting. It's very complex. In addition, a lot of their analysis has been based on empirical data from existing conditions, and we know very well from operating our own groundwater basin, we've been doing it for 100 years, that when you pump a groundwater basin, you affect the seepage rate from a creek. And we also have concerns about their influence on the groundwater levels in Sunol Valley. There are many tributaries that flow through Sunol Valley downstream of San Francisco's dams, and those tribs work their way into Alameda Creek, and we actually exercise our water right and pick up some of that water at our facilities downstream. Since they will be operating this facility year-round, we're not sure what those potential impacts might be on ACWD's water supplies. So, accordingly, we took advantage of the CEQA process to provide comments throughout the process, beginning with the Notice of Preparation in 2015. And the thing that we really just want to emphasize here is that at each step of the way, we told the city that we needed to have daily data to be able to analyze the impacts of this project. We told them in our NOP, we met with them, they actually did coordinate with us to discuss our operations, so we told them through the process But what we found is at each step of the CEQA process, through the draft EIR and through the final EIR, is that our comments and the data we needed were not actually provided or addressed in any fashion. And get my glasses here. And most notably, what we found a little concerning is, if you'll notice, after the completion of the draft EIR, and it goes without saying that in each step we made written and oral comments. After completion of the draft EIR, which is the closure of the public comment period, in June of this year, about 5 months after closure of the comment period, San Francisco finally provided to us the daily data that we'd been requesting to analyze the impacts of this project, potential impacts of this project on our facilities, as well as to have a consideration for the restoration efforts for Steelhead and Alameda Creek watershed. So, I'm sorry, before I move on, I'll note that the last step in the final EIR is that due to a lack of sufficiently addressing our comments, ACWD filed an appeal with the San Francisco Board of Supervisors on the 24th of July, and requesting that, excuse me, making an ask really that the City of San Francisco simply revise the study and recirculate CEQA. So as I mentioned at the top, we're not opposed to the concept, but we do have some serious concerns about potential impacts that we feel are not addressed in CEQA. The basis of our appeal is fourfold. We worked with counsel, as well as we hired a consultant to help us analyze in addition to our own work. And we have a fourfold approach to our appeal. First is identified procedural flaws in complying with CEQA, methodological flaws leading to invalid impact determination. Those impacts result, we believe, in incidental take for Steelhead, and that an incidental take permit is required, although one hasn't been applied for. And we do have concerns about water rights, as mentioned previously. Our appeal was received by the City of San Francisco, and they have set a hearing date for September 5th. I'll go into the basis for our appeal, just the high points, primarily procedural flaws. As mentioned, we were requesting this daily data that we needed to analyze for impacts on our operations as well as on Steelhead, and we didn't receive that until the end of public comment period. And under the CEQA law, basically this failure to make that information public deprives the public of its meaningful opportunity to comment on any substantial and adverse impacts from the project. So we believe that there's a pretty solid legal basis for this statement here. Under methodological flaws, the CEQA analysis, we found we had problems with it from the beginning, and we commented from the beginning that their approach was simply not robust enough. They were using a computer model that was developed for other purposes, doesn't have the scientific rigor to analyze a complex groundwater surface water system such as Sunol Valley. We made comments on that from the beginning of the project. We've also found problems with their hydrologic analyses, in general an inadequacy, a lack of scientific rigor, what could have been accomplished. And in fact, we even recommended in our comment letter on the NOP, as well as made several offers to even work with them throughout the process to maybe develop a more responsible, more reasonable computer model to characterize Sunol Valley. And I might add, we even offered to cost share in that model because we see it being beneficial for the whole fisheries work group. In addition to the methodological flaws, and this is where things get really interesting, we do identify what we believe are pretty serious impacts to Steelhead. Notably, when we got that daily data, we found that the impacts on Steelhead were not properly disclosed, nor were they sufficiently analyzed in the CEQA process. And the reason is the report relied on monthly summaries and even annual summaries of the impacts that this project would have on stream flow conditions. And as mentioned here this evening and many times through the process, we have to look at this at a daily time step. It's a very flashy watershed, and both our operations and Steelhead are impacted at a daily level. When we looked at that daily data that supported their monthly summaries, the daily data they provided, we looked at that and we saw some very different sort of implications for what their project looks like it will be doing on stream flows downstream of their proposed project. So there's no better way to get into this than to actually look at one good example from the data. And I did cherry pick this. This is one strong example to show where we think their data didn't sufficiently address steelhead, but there's many other months that work as well. So I'm going to pull an example specifically from San Francisco's CEQA data, and we're going to take a look at their monthly data that they use to produce their report, or the summary monthly data, as well as the daily data that underlies their conclusions that are in the CEQA report. And we'll specifically look at the month of January 2007 hydrologic conditions. We're going to look at modeling results for a with project and without project scenarios, both monthly and daily. And this is a particularly good month because this is a particularly dry January. It's not a middle of the drought dry, but this is a below average stressed condition. This is one where we see a very clear impact from this project, or what we perceive to be a very clear impact from the project. So what we're looking here is a chart for Niles Canyon gauge, Niles gauge flow in Niles Canyon. The vertical axis is cubic feet per second, or flow, and across the bottom are days of the month of January 2007. And we'll start by identifying that the Fisheries Work Group has long identified 25 CFS as the minimum flow needed in Alameda Creek, in lower Alameda Creek, for adult steelhead to migrate into the watershed. So this is a critical number. This is a governing number for our own fish flows in the month of January. When we hit 25 CFS, ACWD is not even allowed to take a drop of water. Okay, so we're not talking about a scenario at 25 where ACWD is actively recharging. When we look at the monthly data for this particular period, we see the average flow for this month without a project of being 42 CFS. And from San Francisco's, this is San Francisco's data, with the project scenario, they say the average monthly flow would be 29 CFS. So 29 CFS is greater than 25, so it's quite reasonable. You know, this monthly data, it shows a reduction in flow at Niles, but it's reasonable that one could conclude from this average that this doesn't seem to be an impact. There's still more than 25 CFS, so you can see how one might come to that conclusion. Now, when we get the daily data, it looks like a very different story. As we all know, the Alameda Creek watershed doesn't flow at a steady rate. Instead, we get a nice variation dependent on hydrologic events. And we see something that looks more like this. And I'll just walk through a little bit. These peaks are from small runoff events. This is very small for January. We'd often see thousands of CFS. We're not even breaking 100. But as you can see, little rainfall runoff events create little runoff quantities. And the main point is this hydrograph, which changes every day. As we mentioned, it's a flashy system and every day is different. At every single day of this month is above this critical line of 25 CFS. So remember, we said it has an average of 42 CFS. So now when we take the same data provided by the City of San Francisco to look at the daily flow conditions with project, we see substantially lower flows, and most notably, getting back to that critical threshold of 25 CFS, we see quite a few days well below this 25 CFS. In fact, the majority of days of the month are now below that threshold. So again, they reported an average, in this scenario you see an average flow of 29 CFS, but when we look at that daily data, it's quite a different story. Clearly, there's only 9 days that actually meet the passability criteria in Lower Alameda Creek. It's a 70% reduction in passability for an adult steelhead to actually have an opportunity to enter the watershed. So we consider this to be a pretty serious impact for steelhead. And we're not alone in that. Several other entities have reviewed this same daily data and have come to similar conclusions, in fact, the same conclusions. Most notably, that would be the National Marine Fisheries as well as Alameda Creek Alliance. So, what are we doing about this? Well, as mentioned, we filed an appeal, and our next steps in that process are to testify at the appeal hearing. It is still our desire not to try and kill this project, but simply to get San Francisco to work with the Fisheries Work Group, with ACWD, and to develop this project in a more transparent, robust manner. And so we remain completely open to working with the SFPUC and collaborating on an updated model for Sunol Valley and perhaps identifying alternative ways that this project could proceed without impacting Steelhead or ACWD's operations downstream. Again, our ask has been and remains for the city to revise and to recirculate the CEQA process in a collaborative effort with the Alameda Creek Fisheries Work Group. So with that, I will take any questions.
No questions, but just a couple comments, if I may, or would you like to limit to questions?
Please go ahead. No, comments are fine.
So, it is very important for ACWD to understand how this project would impact our water supply, our operations, and the Steelhead Restoration Project. We have invested significant amounts of money, millions of dollars, in this project. I strongly believe that we should encourage San Francisco to work with us. I support staff's recommendation that we don't really want to kill the project. We just want San Francisco to work with us. It's important to ask them to come to the table to work with us and the fishery group to come up with a design that would support the Steelhead Restoration Project instead of impacting it, or at least minimize the impact to the point that the fishery group, work group, and ACWD could accommodate. I heard there is a meeting at the board
September 5th?
in September 5th. I would like to go. I intend to go. There are a couple of issues I have to resolve at work before I could 100% commit to it, but it is important enough that I am definitely interested.
I don't have any questions, however, I have comments as well. I find it very disappointing, the city of San Francisco's whole process on this, and I hope the Board of Supervisors hears us out. Steelhead and Alameda Creek is nothing new. This board has been dealing with that issue for 20 years. It'd be nice if we had finished our ladders by now, but I don't know why it takes so long, but anyway, it is. So it's not new. And from what I'm seeing, this is an impact. We're spending an incredible amount of staff time, and we're going to be spending a lot of money, not to mention future water, on this project. And I cannot envision the city of San Francisco not embracing the Steelhead in Alameda Creek. So I, too, am going to make an attempt to get to that meeting, and I hope that they review this and try to not impact that issue. We made a conscious decision 20 years ago to try to work on this fishery. I'd be extremely disappointed if they didn't decide to do that on the 5th.
I'm very much in agreement with Directors Huang and Director Gunther. I think the staff has done a good job of outlining the district's argument with San Francisco, and I hope that we can work together with San Francisco on a resolution. And I myself am going to try to make it to that meeting on the 5th, because I think it's important that we come to a resolution on this, because this is very very important to the district.
Thomas, thank you for the presentation. I too support an appeal to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors on this issue. I think I was going to bring this up under a later item, but you know, recently we received a grant award from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, $750,000, and another grant of $3 million of Prop 1 money from the Urban Rivers Grant Urban Rivers grant from the California Natural Resources Agency, both to be applied toward the work that we're doing on fish ladders in Alameda Creek. And this agency has made a commitment of tens of millions of dollars going back 20 years. This has been factored into our rates. Our ratepayers have been supporting this effort for steelhead restoration on Alameda Creek. So I think there's a way to resolve this if we actually sit down. I can see where the discrepancy is in using raw monthly data versus daily data. Somehow I believe this can be resolved. But in the meantime, putting forward an appeal is the way to go, and I absolutely will be there if it's September 5th or on a continuance for another date.
Thank you. I have some strong personal feelings that are not necessarily in sync with the board or the districts on the Alameda Creek and the potential for Sunol as a water supply hub. So I will save my comments until then, and we'll have to discuss how we get board remuneration for this currently unidentified meeting in San Francisco. All right. Is there any other issues or comments?
No actions at this time. This is simply an update.
Okay. Thank you. We next move on then to General Manager's Report, which is Achievement of Excellence and Procurement Award.
Yes, this evening, Jonathan Wunderlich will be presenting actually a couple of items. The Achievement of Excellence, as well as addressing a letter from a customer that I believe all the board received.
All right. First, on the procurement issue, our procurement office has been working very hard for the past year or so to implement a number of best practices to qualify for this award. And what I'd like to do now is read a very brief letter from the National Procurement Institute, and it was addressed to Mr. Shaver. It says, I'm pleased to inform you that your agency's procurement department has earned the 2017 Annual Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award. The continuously evolving AEP criteria are designed to measure state-of-the-art and best practices. The Alameda County Water District is one of only 45 agencies in California and one of only 25 special districts in the United States and Canada to receive the award. Congratulations on the 2017 Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award. Receipt of this award is based on an agency implementing a number of best practices. Examples of some of these best practices include automated procurement processes, a centralized procurement authority, ongoing procurement training, having a comprehensive purchasing card program as well as a high level of controls within that program, and conducting ongoing internal and external customer satisfaction surveys. So there are a number of other categories as well, but those are some of the primary categories, and really pleased with the work of our procurement office to work on achieving this award.
That's a tremendous award, and just like our the certificate that Director Akbari received recently for what am I thinking of? Transparency. Right, there we go. Certificate in transparency, but we also received the top financial award as well. And I think this says a lot about our team. Unfortunately, one of our key contributors to that recently went to another organization. So we feel her loss too here. But let me point something out that I've brought up from time to time at our finance meetings. I regularly see articles in the newspaper press about procurement organizations where somebody has embezzled money from that organization. And it seems like there's several cases a year, even right here within the Bay Area, in government organizations. I've always looked at that as one of the most vulnerable parts of government, because you're dealing with different contractors and suppliers, and you can create accounts and everything where it becomes quite confusing. So from the time I stepped onto this board, I've always tried to encourage us to have the right checks and balances in place to prevent anything like that from possibly happening. And meeting all of these criteria to receive this type of award says we have the infrastructure in place to safeguard this agency on behalf of the public. Thank you to the staff.
Thanks, Aaron. Goes for the entire board. Thank you.
Right, so the second item, a letter from a customer was recently addressed to the directors, and we received a copy of this letter in customer service. This customer expressed some concern about her bill, particularly because this customer has been making significant attempts to reduce water usage, and also concerns about the bill because of other concerns within her with health and other things that may be making it difficult for this customer to pay the bill. Customer service staff did reach out and speak with the customer. It turns out the primary concern was that there was concern that water consumption had gone up, and that was the reason why the bill had gone up. And so staff explained our current rate structure, and that actually the consumption had stayed very low, but there have been increases to the service charge. The customer seemed satisfied with understanding that, and we did also mail a letter or mail an application for the Help on Tap program to the customer, and have provided a direct line to one of our reps to help with any questions in filling out that application.
You know, on that note, I would like to make a request. It doesn't have to be done right now, but maybe toward the end of the year, we take another look at how much money's been spent on the Help on Tap program, and then take a look at all of our non-water sources of revenue that can be applicable to the program, to see if we can expand the program. As Mr. Lemos brought up earlier this evening, and we can see it from other organizations that have similar programs in place, they're reimbursing the customer maybe a little bit more, sometimes quite a bit more. So I would like to see, how we may be able to expand the program based on the applicable revenues that we can use here on a program like this.
Sure. For the information of the board, we currently have just over 600 customers approved in the program.
That's good.
If I can follow up on that comment, at the hearings on the AB 401, which was the disadvantaged customer, they've established some preliminary guidelines of 20% of a bill with 12 units per month as being the compensable level. It'd be interesting to see how our Help on Tap numbers compare to the proposed numbers for AB 401 in the state.
So just doing some quick math in my head, a customer using 12 units a month in our district.
6 units a month as opposed to 12. But
Oh,
it could be 12
so 12 units per bi-monthly billing period,
yeah,
then.
probably.
So 6 units per month, or 12 per bi-monthly billing period would be approximately a $50 bill per month, or $100 for the bi-monthly period. So at 20% of that, That would be approximately a $20 credit for the bi-monthly service charge. We currently provide a $15 credit.
So we're close. That'd be about 150 gallons per day on that. Great. Thank you.
A couple more
Next,
general managers
Environmental
reports.
Working Group.
Yep. So for that item, we have Steve Peterson to make a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. N. On Wednesday, July 26, 2017, an advocacy group known as the Environmental Working Group, or EWG, released an updated version of its National Tap Water Database. The updated database uses information gathered from approximately 48,000 public water systems in all 50 states and includes data gathered specifically between the years of 2010 and 2015, including UCMR 3, which stands for the Third Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, that required sampling of 30 contaminants between 2013 and 2015. Prior to the EWG releasing its report, public water systems were given an opportunity to review the data collected on an agency system. Last year, the district staff spent a significant amount of time reviewing EWG's database and reported numerous discrepancies and inaccuracies to EWG. As an example, they got raw water and drinking water mixed up. Then 2 weeks ago, EWG made its database available to the public. Staff again reviewed EWG's database and saw that most of, if not all, of the inaccuracies had been corrected, and we did not discover any significant discrepancies or inaccuracies. EWG reported 3 chemicals for which the district averages exceeded an EWG-selected health guideline, and 8 chemicals for which the district averaged lower than the EWG-selected health guideline. The 3 constituents listed in the database that were above the EWG-selected guideline were chlorate, chromium-6, and radium-226, all of which have been previously made public in the district's annual water quality report, commonly known as the Consumer Confidence Report, and have not exceeded at any time an MCL. The bottom line is that our water meets all state and federal drinking water standards, which are set to protect the public. Additionally, staff has not received any calls from our customers regarding the EWG report. Thank you.
I have a comment on this.
Please, yes. Dr. Sethy.
So on the day that this database was released, I put in my zip code into it, looked at the data, and then I contacted Bob Shaver because I did have some concerns as just a consumer that when you put in your zip code and the data shows up, it set off all kinds of alarm bells in my mind.
Yep.
Because the average consumer is not going to dig down into the data itself and be able to differentiate between different levels and what's acceptable at the federal level, state level, other guidelines. And so by picking out those specific chemical types, I felt like it immediately. I felt like, oh wow, this is scary. I should be on guard here about my water. But the truth was, and I had no idea what this database was about, or the fact that we had been working with that organization until I conversed with Bob. But it made me feel very uncomfortable what the public is receiving right now.
I'd also like to comment. I did the same thing, typed in my zip code, and up come these three, I don't know what you call them. I guess they were 3 alarms. I found that report to be so alarmist. I don't know what they're trying to do. And it's sad because there's so many areas that they could do good. To come out with a report like that, and if I didn't know better, yeah, I would have been alarmed. And I'm reading this thing going, what are they talking about? And, you know, we're not a problem. There are problems in the state of California. There are problems in the United States. There are, oh my God, I couldn't even think about how many problems if we want to go overseas. And this group comes out with this report, reactionary. What's their goal? I don't know. Very frustrating. And see, we're talking very, very frustrating. I almost wanted to write them and say, how could you do this? But of course, if you do that, then you're viewed as, oh my God, they're hiding something. Those guys out in ACWD, they're upset that we exposed them. Exposed us for what? 3 parts per billion? I think that's what one of them was. Like 3 parts per billion. They're in basically non-detect territory on a lot of them. I mean, now you can detect them because science is a whole lot better. 20 years ago, we couldn't detect them at all. So anyway, that was my comment, and I was really, really disappointed. I heard it on the radio. I did go, checked it out, and it was just, all I could say is it's a black eye to the environmental community because people will get this, they'll look at it, and they'll think the sky's falling. I really wish the environmental community would get together and try to, I don't know, do something right. But that isn't right.
So I do have a question for staff. Can you explain where these number comes from? What are they bases, the screening number? So what exactly did we exceed?
Yes.
Where did the number come from?
So I will. I have some. I was prepared for perhaps such a question. So I'll go over all 3 of them. So chlorate was one. Chlorate is a disinfection byproduct. There are no federal or state drinking water standards at this time. And we use sodium hypochlorite as a disinfectant. Over time, it decomposes and chlorate is formed. So that's the source of it and how it gets in the water. So, so for the district, chlorate is primarily a result of decomposition of sodium hypochlorite solution used in the disinfection of drinking water. Chlorate was detected during the UCMR 3 sampling throughout the distribution system and at entry points, and it was reported in our 2014 water quality report.
Right, so the question is, they screened our result against a number.
Right.
What number did they screen against?
The number that was reported was 223 parts per billion. A health guideline that they used was an EPA health reference level. This isn't a, this is a, when there's no MCL, when there's no public health goal, this is just a placeholder number. It's 210. So we're just barely above an EPA health reference level. So that was for chlorate. The second, hexavalent chromium. The MCL was 10 micrograms per liter. It's now unregulated in the state of California as of May 31st, 2017, as a result of a Sacramento Superior Court judgment invalidating hexavalent chromium maximum contaminant level for drinking water. Chrome 6 was detected during our UCMR 3 sampling of our entry points to the distribution system and within the distribution system, but it's never been detected during our Title 22 monitoring program, which is required for our water supply permit by the state board. And the reason why it was reported, was, of course, was through the UCMR 3 sampling. The difference is, Title 22, the reporting level is 1 microgram per liter. For UCMR 3, when it's exploring regulating future contaminants, its reporting level was 0.03 micrograms per liter. So a big difference. What we reported in our database was 0.07, which is above a public health goal of 0.02 parts per billion. But under normal Title 22 regulations, this is below the detection level. The detection level was lowered for the UCMR 3. That's how it was picked up.
So I think the point I'm trying to make is, yes, it exceeded a number, but you have to look at the number to make this exceedance, to put it in context.
Right.
Right. Health reference number, MCOG, MCO goals, those are numbers in the ideal situation when you don't consider technology. Possibilities usually is at the lowest level when you start seeing effects. You know, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, and for the record, is that exceeding those numbers does not mean there's a public health problem.
Right.
That does not mean that our water is not safe to drink. It just exceeded a number. That could be from a laboratory study result in a very ideal situation. In the case of MCOG, it is where we see an effect, but it does not consider, is it even possible for our technology today to address the problem. So just I want the board members to put it in context. It is not just it exceeds the number is bad. You should look at what it actually exceeded and put everything in terms of what is the impact to our customers.
And also what the time period was, the periodicity of how frequently this happened. If it happened one day or 1 week out of the year, it was an isolated case, and they were looking at like 5 years of data, and it just happened during one period of time.
And the last constituent that I mentioned was radium-226. The MCL for a combined radium-226 and radium-228 is 5 picocuries per liter, and that's a measurement of radioactivity material concentrations in a liter of water. Radium-226 was detected in San Francisco Hetch Hetchy supplies in one sampling event in 2012. And as a result, this has been reported annually in our water quality reports since 2012. But due to the low sampling result, we are only required to sample for this constituent once every 6 years. And the public health goal for radium-226 is 0.05 picocuries per liter.
Steve, if I could just add a couple of comments here. I think it might be helpful for the board to have an update on what happened with Chrome 6, because I mean, we've been talking about what the requirements are, what was progressing over the last several years, but all of a sudden things changed. I also wanted to report here, the state offered new guidelines this morning, I believe, on 123 TCH, and so I checked that database that the state offered to see if any part of our community had been affected, because we did have agriculture here, you know. There was no evident place in our Tri-City area that was affected, but all of the agricultural areas along Highway 99 and Salinas Valley, the levels that they've tested for in those situations, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times higher than should be present in their water supplies. And now these disadvantaged communities, for the large part, are being asked to put in systems, you know, that can purify the water at great expense. Nobody knows how to get these things funded. Just adds another stress to those communities.
I just want to respond to your mentioning of Chrome 6. It is not a concern in our water district. The one detection level that was picked up is 100 times below the MCL. That was just with what do you call it? Overruled by the courts. I just want to put that into perspective.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you. We've gone along for quite a while on water quality issues.
We have one more general manager.
We have
report.
one happy director.
Just want to give the board a quick update on California Water Fix. You may have seen some more things in the news, but last month I reported that on June 26, 2 federal agencies, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service, released their biological opinions for California Water Fix. And since then, since the last board meeting, there have been 2 additional important milestones for California Water Fix. On July 21st, the Department of Water Resources issued a notice of determination that certifies California Water Fix complies with the California Environmental Quality Act. This certification was a result of more than a decade of analysis, review, and public comment. Then a week later, on July 28th, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife issued an incidental take permit. And under this permit, California Water Fix will comply with the California Endangered Species Act by implementing measures to minimize impacts of any incidental take of state endangered species. So all of these important, significant actions happened just this summer, and it allows California Water Fix to take important steps forward.
Our governor's very happy, right?
He is.
Does that not also open the door now for litigation, which John Garamendi has assured us will take at least 10 years to go through the courts?
Been fully anticipated.
Thank you.
That's it for General Manager's reports.
Thank you. Next is Director's comments, reports, and meetings attended, and agenda item request.
Nothing from me.
I'm good.
Nothing from mine.
Sethy?
Okay. Do you want to report first on Water Now Alliance?
No.
We're both there.
Since it came as one of the items under discussion earlier this evening, there was a meeting at East Bay MUD's offices in Oakland with the Water Now Alliance sponsoring it on conservation as a continuing requirement, way of life. They had the lead from the State Water Resources Control Board, manager in charge of this area as a speaker. Had someone come in from Southern Nevada, where they had been very successful in their reductions in water supply. We had representatives who had been very active in the environmental community and some of the policymakers. I found the meeting to be extraordinarily useful and actually far more informative because of the quality of the speakers than many, and this concentration of the topic, than even attending some of the Aqua sessions. It was highly professional. Next was a Region 1 Municipal Water District tour of Marin County Water District's facilities and watershed. It really is a remarkable tiering of about 5 reservoirs that have been built over the last 150, 160 years. We had the opportunity of going into a locked area at the top of Mount Tam, where the Air Force had the Mill Valley Air Force Station. One time over 110 buildings. Now I think there's one, which was the former bowling alley, still standing. And it was an extraordinary view and quite an opportunity. It was a group of about 30 water professionals and directors from primarily the northern part of the state. I would like to make, I have one comment that I wanted to talk about. Did you want to talk about the 2 meetings? Tours?
Yeah, after you're done.
Okay. Well, if you want to stay on topic, we can talk about those, and I have one issue I want to bring.
No, bring it up right now.
Okay. The other was, there was a questionnaire with legal and voters asking, and one of the questions related to Purple Pipe and Pacific Commons. And I note that going back almost 5 years ago, approximately 5 years ago, we put into our CIP a project where we were going to use the Purple Pipe with raw well water that was available in the area. What's important about that is that the projected costs are probably about 1/50th or less of the cost of recycled water in the same pipe. Hopefully that's a practice that could be replicated throughout the district. And it really raises questions about the feasibility, comparable feasibility of recycled water under any circumstances. When we talked about the water rate increases and impacts on school districts, etc., one of the recommendations was they would drill some wells. We only charge $8 an acre foot for municipal recreation, but even if we charge the full full water reclamation fee, it's a small fraction of the cost of using treated water. And recycled water is high cost energy, and added cost is energy, so it's a poor environmental approach and a solution. That's my take. Thank you.
I concur with your comments there on use of groundwater and recycled water. Recycled water makes a lot of sense in some communities, but you really have to do a cost-benefit analysis, and our district really has a portfolio of different water sources, which makes us quite reliable. So I concur with what you're saying. In reference to the 2 meetings that we attended, and I have several items here tonight, so bear with me. I'll try to do it as quickly as I can. At the Water Now Alliance, I got into a discussion not only with Walt Wadlow, our former general manager, but some of the East Bay MUD board members, Frank Mellon and others that were present, and then with board members like Cynthia Kohler from Marin Municipal Water District. And we were talking about rates. What's going on with rates around the Bay Area, Northern California. And while it hasn't made a lot of the press here, I just want to share with our board members here that when we raised our service charge 100% several years back, and then increased it again, and then again, I was putting forward the argument that that would help us out in any recession or drought, to offer us revenue stability, revenue reliability, revenue predictability. Well, it's amazing, as you start going around to conferences now, people are saying, you guys were the first in the state to do that. Nobody ever thought a district would do that, and really change their financial structure and how they were trying to fund themselves. Now we see that a lot of districts are following in our footsteps, and they're ignoring what the earlier best management practices were recommended for districts. So it was interesting hearing from people that are saying, yeah, we used you as part of our reason for moving forward in this manner for our district. And East Bay Mud has been following in our footsteps. Hayward, just 2 weeks ago at their city council meeting, raised their service charge 50% over a 2-year period and left the commodity rate flat. Exactly what we did. So Hayward was making a similar argument. We are unable to fund our infrastructure requirements in our community. We have water mains that are breaking everywhere around town. Last summer when it heated up, again this summer. And they don't have the reserves to do the fixes. Same with the city of Pleasanton. So very interesting to get other people's perspectives on where rates are and where they're heading and how they're structuring them. Number two, there was a gentleman from DWR who gave a presentation on 2 pilot programs where they're using the GIS system to look at where turf can be replaced with drought-tolerant gardens and drought-tolerant plants. And so I got into a discussion with him after we were done, and I informed him that our district had a database that we were using. I referred him to Stephanie Nevins if he wanted to follow up, because it seemed to me that we were years ahead of where DWR was, and they're trying to set up a model for all water districts across the state of California. So they're nearing the end of their 2 pilot programs, and so I suggested they work with our district, and I think we have a fabulous way of looking at, you know, all the commercial, industrial customers, others to target for making landscape improvements and reducing their water usage. So that was really interesting. Lastly, there was discussion about the California Data Collaborative. I have some information here if anybody wants to read about it. This is a very interesting organization. I have been to a couple of presentations now, and these are a set of water districts, water utilities, government entities that are working under a nonprofit organization, the California Data Collaborative, with Netflix, Facebook, Google, other high-tech companies, and they are using behavioral science and data analytics to help out with government entities like ourselves. And it's really fascinating because they can get into what every one of our customers are doing in terms of movie viewing, restaurants they like to go to, shopping habits, everything that helps you build capability to go out and better communicate with your customers, do better marketing, work toward water conservation, how you can encourage people and target people scientifically for lawn replacement programs, all kinds of things. So Director Weed and I are going to be attending the follow-up to this meeting, covering just data analytics and this California Data Collaborative at Stanford University on the 24th and 25th of August. So I'm really looking forward to that, and it just seems really exciting that other water districts are now leveraging all this data and working with these high-tech companies. I feel like we're one of those water agencies that should, you know, become more happening and get involved. So switching to Marin, the watershed tour at MMWD. Yeah, it was pretty extraordinary. We got to spend time on top of the west peak of Mount Tam, which is not publicly accessible, and very interesting to see this former Air Force facility. And we had views all the way from Santa Cruz, all the way up past Tamales Bay, up to Mount Sonoma, all the way out to Mount Diablo. I mean, you literally could see everything, including the Farallones. So, but there were a few things I learned on this trip that I thought were useful for our district that I want to relay here. One, the North Marin Water District, which is just north of Marin Municipal Water District, has a little bit of a carve-out all around Novato, has been piloting an AMI sets of tools around their district, and they've gotten to the point where they are in a pre-selection of looking at 2 technology offerings, both relying on the cellular system. One is a proposal from AT&T and the other is from Verizon. And when I was running my company, AirPrime, I was focused on the design and manufacturing of cellular modems. And the addressable market at the time, looking back 20 years ago, was about 100 million computers, maybe 200 million, about 4 billion addressable units, if you could even think that far, on smartphones. But the market of what I called machine-to-machine was about 50 billion, or maybe even 100 billion. That was the biggest market for the future for cellular modems. Now we're seeing the adoption of these cellular modems in these type of applications. I found it very exciting that the very technology I was working with, now AT&T and Verizon was an investor in my company, it's now being deployed. It's really exciting. And I think that's the way to go. Instead of building your own network, which is what some other water utilities have been doing, leverage the available infrastructure that's there right now over the cellular system. So I hope we will explore or contact North Marin Water District to perhaps learn from the exercise that they have gone through. Second, Director Weed and I had conversations with a number of people, including the president of Aqua, Kathy Teagues, and with Vice President Brent Hasty and others about this whole concept of putting the service charge onto the property tax bill. And I felt that, I wasn't feeling, there was evident interest in doing this from quite a number of the people that we spoke with. The president of Aqua, vice president of Aqua said, don't even wait a year to put this idea into the Aqua Legislative Committee. They were saying, get it in right now. This is important. We need a statewide discussion on this issue. They were encouraging both Director Weed and I, while we were on top of Alpine Lake Dam, get it done now. They kept repeating that over and over again. And so I want to encourage us, just get in a simple proposal that opens up the door and gets the discussion going. I also had a long conversation with David Bentley, He's the head of finance for North Marin Water District, same water district I was talking about. They were formed under the County Water Act. They were formerly known as North Marin County Water District, but that kind of got confusing with the Sonoma County Water Agency. So, as the head of finance, David Bentley was saying, this is really the way that it should be done. He kept emphasizing his experience with the sanitary business. He likes the idea principally because you can, our consumers can deduct it from their taxes. There are ways to ease the billing efforts for people that are low income so that they pay off the bill when their house is sold or something like that, or transferred. I was hearing from a number of people as we were talking about this idea openly, get it into Aqua's legislative committee cycle right now. Don't wait a year. And that's coming right from the top. All right, I have a few other minor things here. I sent a email to Mr. N earlier today. There was a very interesting set of articles and photos and videos that came out yesterday and today from the Mercury News and Sacramento Bee on what's going on at Lake Oroville. And the videos are really interesting because you can't believe how fast this project has moved from design to implementation in just the few short board meetings that we've been here this spring and summer. Truly amazing what they're doing. But there are also reports now coming out about concerns about the type of concrete that's being used in the rehabilitation of the Oroville spillway. So even right now, as they're getting this done, working through everything, it's not clear whether they may be creating some new problems down the road. And they won't be able to put the final layers of permanent concrete down until next year. So they're doing the best they can, and it's pretty amazing to watch the video. So I asked Stephen if he would pass that around to the staff and board.
Director Sethy, that was forwarded to all the board members just before we started.
Oh, great. Okay, good. All right, and then Laura, I loved your letter in the Tri-City Voice. It made me laugh. I was thinking about my own parents when I was that age, pointing things out. So I really enjoyed that. I think when somebody writes something personal like that, it's much more readable. And it's a human interest story, the way that it comes across, instead of, a scientific water article. So, good job. All right. And lastly, I have a request that I would like to put in to staff. When Director Weed and I were on the Bay Delta tour, there were some really interesting things that I learned along the way. But one thing that stood out, and I actually never talked with John about this afterward, was we were at a water treatment plant for Contra Costa Water District, a relatively new plant, very sophisticated, and up near Brentwood. And what really caught my eye, and so I started asking a lot of questions of the operations people and other staff members, was they have ozone at the beginning of their process, and then they finish their water with another ozone treatment before it leaves the plant into the distribution system. and I had never seen that before. And so I asked what were the reasons for having done that. This is part of the benefit of going on some of these educational trips. They said that after long consideration, they did this because it helped to improve the taste and odor of the water. And that was the primary purpose. The disinfection was secondary, more important at the front end. But it was being done at the back end as well to improve taste and odor. So this past summer, we've been having a few taste and odor problems ourselves using the same Delta water. It's very dirty, and even with our ozone at our treatment plant in Mission San Jose, TP2, it hasn't been effective enough. And even Mr. Shaver and I, who live near each other, there were taste and odor problems in our neighborhood as well. So I would like to make a request to staff. First, one, take a look and bring this to the Water Quality Committee where we have an expert in Director Huang to take a look at what it would cost to put in secondary ozone treatment at our plant. Even if the recommendation from staff is that we don't do it, I still would like to understand the cost. And I have an idea of what it might be based on the installation of the ozone and process that we put in place a few years back. But the second thing I'd like to have the staff take a look at is what it would cost and what the benefits might be of putting in a cooling unit at TP2 so that the ozone process is more efficient. Does that make sense?
It most certainly does.
Okay. So and I'm familiar with this from semiconductor industry. The lower you can get that temperature down on something like that, the more efficient it will be. And so I'd just like to understand better what the benefits are. And might be helpful to contact Contra Costa Water District too and find out from a more senior level person why they really did put in 2 ozone operations there. So that's it for me for this evening, and I wish everyone well.
Thank you. Is there any other business to be brought before the board?
President Weed, I'm not sure if you want to wrap up one loose end that we had from earlier in the meeting where there was some discussion about an ad hoc committee, and I don't know if we want to take this up at this time as far as the formation of the committee, or is there interest by the board?
We had this, to revisit the discussion on board benefits and meetings. We've taken an action. If a committee is to be set up, it has to be a formal committee. Has to be set up by the, including an advisory committee. Must be done by the board itself. But would that not have to be on an agenda?
That's correct. So your board, I did look this up in your board rules, and the board rules, thank you, Mr. District Secretary. The board rules require that it takes the board action to create an advisory committee, so it should be on an agenda. It should be agendized on an agenda.
So we have some time to review that and find the best way. When we last modified the rules, and I think we did, there were some great benefits from that revision. We did it in a workshop. So let us discuss what the best scenario is going forward.
Can I ask one quick question here of Mr. Stevenson? I know I'm catching you by surprise here, but I've been driving, I always drive on Sale Padre from Mission San Jose down to Kaiser and shopping and stuff. We have this project that we're working on there, the pipeline improvement project,
Correct.
and I'm assuming it started from what I've...
Yeah, the work's underway, yes.
Right, and so I wondered, since that's one of our first experiences with this type of pipeline
Pipeliner,
renewal,
yeah, mm-hmm.
How is it working? How's it
Well, we don't know yet. It hasn't been done yet.
But how is everything working in terms of applying this and then allowing it to dry and
Right.
everything
So that
else?
process hasn't begun yet.
Okay.
We hope that it'll start within the next couple of weeks. Actually, our contractor had some issues with U.S. Customs in getting some of the materials delivered. So there's been a little bit of a delay. But so we haven't gone through that process yet, so I don't have a whole lot to report. But we're very interested in how this process will work, the details, because we're part of what we're trying to accomplish is to evaluate this as one of the potential tools in our main renewal toolbox.
Well, I was hoping maybe at the October meeting we could get an update.
Sure.
And find out what it cost, what we learned, how we can apply this to other larger pipeline projects.
Sure.
It sounds fascinating.
Indeed.
All right, thank you. Again, any additional information we brought before the board at this meeting? If not, then we have a motion for adjournment.
Let's do it.
I'll make a motion.
We are adjourned at a time